Well, hello, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well this Wednesday afternoon. At least I think it's Wednesday according to my calendar. You never know. I could be wrong. But hey, my name's Larry Metter. I'm the channel chief at Cavelo, and I'll be hosting today's webinar live stream, little panel that we're doing. And we're going to wait just a couple of seconds, let some folks come in here, kill a little bit of time. So hope everybody's having a good Wednesday afternoon. And if you want to comment and chat about where you're calling in from, oh, you can tell I've been around a long time. Where you have joined us from, that would be fantastic. Yeah, I date back to the days of 2400 baud modems and thought I was really hot stuff when I jumped up to 9600, then 19.2, all that fun stuff. But so what we'll do is jump to the introductions here, and want to introduce you to our speakers today, James Minyaka, who is the CEO and founder at Cavelo. And then we also have Zach Kronkowski, who is the co-founder and CRO over at Senteon, some good friends of ours. And actually, I think the CRO really stands for Chief RV Officer because, as you can tell, he's living life in an RV, and I'm kind of envious, especially, are you always stationary, Zach, or are you kind of traveling around?
So right now I'm doing a lot of upgrades, but I do appreciate the opportunity to shout out the RV, and you're the first one to give the CRVO. I actually love that. Might update my LinkedIn after the call. But I just moved in to close out last year, and it was a used RV. They said move in ready, and then we got in here and realized we wanted everything redone. So I don't know if home ownership's the same way, but RV ownership, a lot of additions.
Yes, you are absolutely correct. Well, appreciate that. So where are you calling from right now, Zach?
So I'm parked in San Jose area, a smaller city called Morgan Hill on the south rim of San Jose.
Yep.
And been getting to see the area, close enough to the water, close enough to the hills, kind of little inland, but close enough.
There you go.
And Larry, if you don't mind me asking, you ever thought of living in an RV yourself?
I've thought about it. Nowhere close to doing it. My parents used to have a 42-foot Class A RV that I drove them around and would spend the night and stuff like that with my kids, and I loved it. You never know, though. One day maybe I'll do that.
I think Larry, we need a Cavelo RV.
I think we do. I think that'd look fantastic. We could,
I think
Cavelo on the side.
Yeah, we'll just tour the countryside from event to event. We'll just have our own RV. We'll have the big logo on the outside.
Down for a joint RV tailgate, Senteon Cavelo collab.
I was about to suggest that.
Larry, we can bring our dogs, like Daisy. Go. Yeah.
Daisy, Elsie.
You guys buy the smoker. I'll pick up the meat.
There we go.
I'm a gluten-free vegan.
Better. I'll bring the bourbon. Surprise.
I'll bring the wine.
James, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Larry. Thank you for asking.
Fantastic. And you are joining us from where?
Kitchener-Waterloo. Just outside Toronto, where BlackBerry was born and BlackBerry died. Everyone remembers BlackBerry.
Whole life cycle.
Yeah.
Was BlackBerry and RIM the same company?
Or no? Yeah, they rebranded it from RIM to BlackBerry later in their journey.
All right. Well, I think we've killed a little time here. I was just trying to give, not everybody's clock is synced right with mine, so I was just trying to give a couple of minutes so people can join us. But I know we're all busy folks, so we'll quit talking the nicety and fun stuff, and we'll get moving on with our chief RV officer and our CEO. And, we've got some interesting things to talk about, I hope. And I'm going to jump right into it. Maybe I'm a little bit controversial here. I don't know. But in my opinion, most vulnerability management programs fail before they even get off of the ground. Why is that, fellas? Are MSPs just too focused on the tools versus the business impact outcome? Is the root of the problem technical? Is it operational, cultural? Give us your thoughts on this. And I'll start with James here.
Yeah, I think traditionally vulnerability management has been, well, it's been around forever, and we look at it in a one-dimensional view, which is wrong. And so that one-dimensional view is we found a bunch of vulnerabilities and just patch. It's not that easy, number one. And if you're an MSP, you know this better than we do. There's multiple RMM tools out there. You try to patch, it doesn't work. The registry hasn't changed, and it just goes on and on. There's remote users. It's harder now with the landscape the way it is. And so going back to that one-dimensional landscape or that one-dimensional view, there's 60,000 plus vulnerabilities out there. You're not going to patch it all. And so the reality is, talking to some of our customers, MSPs and their customers feel like, they're just drowning. And so the reality is, if you're not going to do something, and that's the remediation, why bother, right? And so I look at it in a multi-dimensional view into what's your threat landscape actually look like. So if you have a risky asset, and I view an asset being, it could be a laptop, it could be your actual data that's on the laptop, it could be the actual user. If you could deem there's a riskier asset than others, then there should be a different cadence around remediation with those assets. And so that's that multi-dimensional view that we've never had before, Larry. And so, looking at it in a multi-dimensional view gives the remediation a better chance of actually doing what we're trying to do, which is lower the threat of a data breach. And so, I'm also a big believer. If you don't know where your data is, how are you going to protect it, right? And your data could be in many different facets now that we have cloud computing. It used to be that it was on one server. That's not the case. Duplicate data, all that good stuff. So I think at the end of the day, we need to rethink the way we're looking at vulnerability management. And before I end, because I know Zach will have a lot to say about this, vulnerabilities they're not just software. It's like we've used vulnerability management the wrong way. That word is vulnerabilities as it relates to weakness in your architecture, your software. It just so happens it's been software up until today, and really what it's now turning into is it's configuration management. It's much more. It's looking at it from a social engineering perspective. That's a vulnerability as well. And so I think taking a step back, we need to rethink the way we look at the threats in our landscape, and looking at it in a pragmatic approach rather than it's a one sweep wonder and we're just going to be more secure, which is never going to happen because you're not going to remediate that way anyway. It's in the practical world.
Did you just say Microsoft may not be secure by design? I'm very confused.
Did I? I threw it out there for you, Zach. I
didn't want to put a brand out there. No, I mean, I am and for those who don't know Senteon, like we focus literally on remediation. So I've been looking at this aspect of vulnerability management for honestly the life cycle of Senteon. So it's been multiple years, and it really wasn't until 2025, and Cavelo's been a massive champion of this, but to hear another vendor actually say the words remediation on a webinar and not just talk about like, here's the best way to remediate, here are the steps to remediate, but actually look at the innovation to perform remediation. I mean, Cavelo's one of the early ones to start doing this alongside with us, different scopes, which we'll get into maybe in a different session, but it's so refreshing to hear vulnerability management start to be a little criticized, right? This is something that has always been in a stack, in a security program, but what was its actual place? And that's where I think we're starting to change the narrative as both of us are championing this aspect. And Larry, I guess going back to your initial question, right? Why are they failing before they get off the ground? So my take here is the existing culture, especially in the MSP market, the existing culture rewards detection. I hear success stories, right? And I call these success stories with quotes, right? MSPs bragging about, hey, got a new client because I showed them all this stuff wrong, right? One of the questions I'm starting to ask is, okay, so when you show them what's wrong, can you explain to me how you follow up on how you made it better? Do you do these QBRs? Do you do these follow-ups? And a lot of times it's a sales tool. A vulnerability management tool or platform or plan is not a sales tactic. It should be part of a program. And that's the real gap from my point of view. Culture rewards detection, but remediation is just
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad go ahead, James. Sorry.
Do you think we have a couple of customers that gamified the remediation piece? And I think it's brilliant. Like it's so basically you get incented or you get your bonus is wrapped around how much can you remediate in your client site, right? And so because at the end of the day, it's again what we said before. It's if you can't do something about it, why are we monitoring it other than checking the box from a compliance perspective, which we know we have to do, but at the end of the day, that doesn't do anything. And so
tell me more about this gamify piece, brother. So is this something where they're looking at the Cavelo interface and then they're actually competing to see who can get the highest priorities? Like, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So they're well, it's simple as the individuals that are in charge of remediation, they have a certain KPI around, they have to remediate X amount in whatever sites to make their bonus. It's that simple. So they realize that this is an important part of their cybersecurity practice. And you know how you incent people, you know how you change behavior through incenting them, right? So I think it's brilliant. And wrapping that culture piece around that is again another thing that I think is important. So I agree with you, Zach, wholeheartedly.
That's awesome to hear. But yeah, I mean that's cool. Just having the visibility, right? I mean, just to put a bow on this one, Larry, it's own. I mean, James, I guess I don't want to take Larry's job here, but ownership. When a new user signs up for Cavelo, do you even ask them like, hey, who's going to own the vulnerabilities that Cavelo finds? Is ownership part of your discussion, or do you see people just buying a tool and then having the tool tell them? Or is there, I mean, you're talking about gamifying, so in some cases engineers are responsible, but would you say there's an owner of these vulnerabilities in every sale?
Yeah, yes and no. I'd say the smaller MSPs, they're just getting started, Zach, right? So they're getting pushed to do these type of cybersecurity pieces in their practice because of regulatory compliance, cybersecurity, insurance renewal, all that stuff, which is perfectly fine. And historically, that's been the way, and best practice, but historically, that's been kind of the way the industry has moved along. And at the end of the day, we actually have it so that we have our back. So we have specific roles that are dedicated to certain, like remediation, for example. So I'd say the smaller ones, not so much. They kind of have to walk through the journey of, hey, we got to bundle this, package it, we got to get it out there. And then what happens is the next conversation with the customer is what next, right? So we certainly help guide them, and we have a whole go-to-market playbook around that. But probably the more mature ones, they have multiple people. So they'll have multiple people dedicated to specific end clients, and then what they do is, depending on the end client, they'll have certain rules that are applied to. For example, if it's a bank versus a manufacturing company, they might be more sensitive towards certain type of remediation than others. And at the end of the day, let's call it out. Everyone's scared of remediation for the reason of blue screen of death and all that stuff, right? So
afraid of updates at this point, not even just remediation.
It's like the old days, you would be like, how long has that server been up for? Right? It's like, it's 680 days, and you're like, don't touch it, don't breathe it around it, because you don't know what's going to happen, right?
So you dare change the thermostat.
Exactly. It's dusty. It's just chugging along. But I think that the reality is what we know today is that those days are gone. There's enough risk out there. We have to change we're going to check the box to, we actually need to do something to lower the risk of a cyber breach.
Yeah.
And absolutely.
My question there kind of came from personal experience. As we were hitting a more mature MSP market and having these discussions, one of my questions now is like, hey, like if this ends up being a good fit, like, do you have a asset owner who would be controlling Senteon? And realistically, if they can't answer that question, and sometimes they can't, like, it's just kind of, everyone's like, well, yeah, I'll be handling it. I'd say the better partners are the ones who are able to say, yeah, this would be Mike's responsibility, Shelly's responsibility. And that's where, again, going back to the root of this whole initial discussion, why do programs fail before they're off the ground? You might buy a tool before you have a program, right? You can't really have a vulnerability management program if you just have tools and no responsibility creation. You can have a vulnerability management program, or at least processes in place before purchasing a Cavelo, before purchasing a Senteon, which we're not vulnerability management, we're hardening. But my point is, like, the process should be put in place, and then the tools enhance the process with owners.
If I can add, Zach, I totally agree. I think the other piece to it is you've got to streamline it and automate it as much as possible. Because like the challenge that I see is I've talked to MSPs where they're like, it's just like, copy paste. It's like they're using spreadsheets in between the tools. And I'm like, this is the difference between a platform and tools, right? We got to get away from that. It's your tech stack, and it should automate as much as possible, because at the end of the day, you can't hire high talent resources anymore. You want them focused on the actual triaging, what's going on, high level. We as vendors, and this is to our partnership, we need to work together to make it so that we can do the API integration, so that it's just like hit a button, and it's never that easy to all the engineers out there. But you hit a button and good stuff happens along the way, right?
Yep, absolutely. Good stuff, guys. Really appreciate the open discussion and dialogue going back and forth. Sorry, I keep trying to interrupt, but in the interest of being the moderator and trying to keep things flowing, I've kind of got to do that. So, and I'm so glad we brought up remediation. And I got a feeling I already know the answer to this next slide, the question that we've got up there. But let me hear your thoughts. Are MSPs over prioritizing vulnerability discovery and under prioritizing remediation? Like I said, I think I know the answer based off of the conversation, but Zach, I'm going to throw this one to you first.
Yeah. We might have hinted that this might have been the following topic, right? We might have saw the slides ahead of time, but no. I mean, just as context, I guess, on our relationship too, James, I think I met you first at Connect just in November, and we immediately hit it off just about this. So Larry, we'll do our best to let you keep us on a schedule, but we might end up just ranting on a few things.
Not a problem.
But no, so this aspect here, I always like to say, and this is by no means like downplaying any layer of security, because they are all very much important. But I find a lot of times, like, vulnerability discovery, I compare to awareness campaigns or security awareness, phishing training and stuff. There's a lot of awareness, training on what to do, how to look out for things. But then when it comes to actually putting the guardrails and almost controlling or attempting to create good customer behavior or end user behavior, those guardrails aren't there. If I was going on a hiking trip and it was very dangerous, right? And I'm very prone to falling off cliffs. Am I better if I just know not to fall off the cliff, or am I going to be safer if there's a guardrail and I know not to fall off the cliff, right? So I'm seeing MSPs a lot of times are trying to do just awareness, put the vulnerability risk on their clients of just telling them, but not willing to do the work of actually installing the guardrails. Because that's the quiet part, right? That's the quiet, complicated security engineer needed part. While awareness, a non-security person can talk about awareness.
No, great points. James, what you got there?
We've all been. No, it's interesting, because I think one of the biggest, not fears, but challenges as a vendor is, when there's a problem, we always get blamed for everything, right? That's the reality, because who changed what, and I think there's a kind of a hybrid between, I call it, when we're doing our roadmap and we talk about the product, it's like I literally want them to accept the liability, and they have to press a button, almost sign their name, and then it's like boom. Because 9 times out of 10, when we go and we actually look at what caused the issue, we'll show them point blank, this was on your side. But it's natural to blame others, because that's just how it goes. And it wastes so much time. And at the end of the day, let's be honest, the liability is with the MSP to the end customer. It's really not us. Like we're augmenting, we're helping them out. And so I think there's guardrails in the sense of that you can build into the product, which which can allow for that kind of hybrid model where, someone is taking the liability. Even like for us, when we create white filters, it's like, we'll have it so that, do you want to just do this for 6 months and then it goes back to where it was before? But there's always an audit trail. It's like, tell us what changed, because we all forget. Like, it's like, the old days, well, not the old days, you make a change on a server, doesn't come into effect till after the reboot, right? But then you forget what you changed, and then badness happens.
And
Yep.
it's funny, you said, and I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, but you mentioned the word liability. I just did a webinar with Eric Taylor, who does like IR and forensics, and I asked a very pointed question because I was curious his take, and now I'm going to ask you. A lot of these MSPs who maybe use Cavelo, use Senteon, right? They will not remediate everything, right? They may do their best, but as we know, and you said, there's too much to do everything. If an incident were to happen and there is audible, trackable proof that Cavelo, that Senteon said this is not remediated and should, and an incident happens, is that MSP liable for negligence? Are they knew about it? Who's at fault here?
Well, we know that all it takes is one court case to change everything. Like, it's the truth. You have to be careful. I think, like, the argument is like, and we see this a lot, where it's like your attack surface doesn't have a certain software that's installed, so we help out with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, at the end of the day, it's either human error. 80% of breaches happen because of human error. You forget to do something. We're only human. You're not going to stop that. Or there's a mechanical issue where, like, the PID's not starting or something along those lines. We can have whatever contract, pass-through statements, and all, with our customers to say the liability's on you. But at the end of the day, all it takes is one court case for that to change.
And I think there have been some. I think the MFA one's the most popular and most renowned. But yeah, there's plenty of them. And to circle back, like on what we were talking about with ownership, and that's something I'm really leaning into personally in a lot of my conversations now. I would consider it a process and ownership failure, right? It is on Cavelo and your guys' massive value prop of helping prioritize, but it is a process and ownership of looking and keeping that up to date and so forth. So I definitely would be on the side of, it does take the court case to make this by law, but I am on the side like, hey, if you have this prioritized, it's on your list, like that liability, if it's not, assigned complementary control or something, really does land on the MSP. And that's where the other gentleman also landed.
Yep. Makes sense. All right. Good stuff. Appreciate it. So there's lots of components to a successful vulnerability management program. To me, asset and data visibility are critical components, but I kind of feel like these are often overlooked, and curious as to your thoughts on that. And also curious as to how do you both feel that MSPs could help prioritize these with their clients? And James, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, we talk about attack surface. It's really your threat landscape. It's everything, all your components, your cloud offerings that are out there. But kind of narrowing down what that means is, if you could have a server out there, you could have a laptop out there that doesn't have any data on it. It's not as risky as your CFO that has a lot of the data on it, right? You could argue you could use that as a way of getting in the network and all that good stuff, but it's becoming less and less because of endpoint protection, right? And so you have to understand all your assets, number one, right? And it comes down to what Zach said about, we talked about this, which is, the liability piece. If you don't have specific software that should be installed and you're non-compliant for whatever reason, that's a weak link in your attack surface. And so understanding all those components and then overlaying where your actual data is, it gives you that view into your threat landscape to say that each asset doesn't equal the same, right? And you can then create rules based off of that. And, my simple one is like the CFO probably has access to the most sensitive data in your organization, but you would be surprised. It's actually also the receptionist, right? It's who has access to those files, who has access to the HR folder. we've seen it so that there's an audit and they open it up to the external world, like whether or not it's Deloitte, KPMG, these big firms, they forget that it's open, and it's open without passwords. Like the challenge is there's so much data, there's more assets, people have multiple machines, and because of that, it's becoming more complex. And so the first point in that is you've got to understand what that, it's got to be continuous. It cannot be a one-time scan. It changes in real time. It's something that is absolutely critical in your cybersecurity practice.
And what's interesting there, I mean, talking about the assistant, the CFO, right? It's all sure the data may be stored, but if we're talking about an incident actually happening and lateral movement and whatnot, if you don't actually have the right access control in place, that computer used by the intern is almost just as good of an entry point as getting directly to the CFO. Because if there's no access control in place, they're going to move all across the network. And I'll take this question in a different route, because I agree with prioritization needs to be critical. Creating the baselines is obviously everything. And you hinted on this at the end, but I would agree visibility is critical component. But the one thing almost even more critical is if that visibility randomly changes, right? Hey, that was green then, now it's red, or now, hey, we remediate this. Why is it red again? Visibility without context. That's the gap that I see, and where I see opportunity for Cavelo, for Senteon, right? When we're looking at the registration keys on the endpoint level and you're looking at the cloud level, we constantly see Windows updates changing these reg keys. We see applications newly installed changing these, and we don't, even Senseon today, we don't have a good way to present exactly which application or what exactly happened. But we're finding this is more and more becoming our differentiator as we do develop this side of the house, is the context behind the visibility. Are you seeing anything like that too?
So I kind of look at a different point of view. I think it's cutting through the noise. And so the challenge that we have in today's world is there's so much noise.
Yeah.
And too much noise equals people just throw up their hands and say, I can't do it. Or there's false positives and we don't believe the data. And so giving that context allows for you to make the right decisions based off of the data and the substance of the data, right? And so the challenge is, on the surface, it might look a certain way, but when you start to look at the registry, it's completely different. You know this, Zach. This is your world, right?
It's horrible.
But to manually do that, you can't do it. There's no way you can manually do it. There's just no way. So with partnerships like what we have and new technology allows you to get that type of data and action it. It's all about cutting through the noise and making it so that it's actionable for our MSPs.
I guess even how would you weight, because Cavelo, again, the announcement, you guys are getting into the remediation side, which is awesome. When a score, we'll just use a score example. Everyone wants their secure score to be good. I don't know if Cavelo has a score system to their platform, but anyway, everyone wants the score to be higher, right? If you have one tenant or even one machine that's 80% score, that's great. And then the next day they're at 50, the next day they're back at 80. Would that be a larger prioritization? Like, what is causing that change, or I'm trying to really depict, like, where is that enforcement aspect in a vulnerability program?
Yeah. So this is tough, right? Because everyone has a different perspective on how you measure. We're really talking about measuring risk, right?
Yes.
And so at the end of the day, you could argue regulatory compliance frameworks have this, but what we've learned is it's really the customer that needs to understand what their risk is. And so I actually think that it's the executives, it's that you have to put almost like a quasi board together to say, because you're never going to have zero risk, right? You're on the internet. What's acceptable for us today? What's our target for tomorrow? So it's not necessarily the absolute number. It is the it's the linear number over a period of time. And obviously you want the risk to go down rather than up. But at the end of the day, to your point, Zach, what if you add more machines? What if data grows, you don't archive it? This is why that's a tough topic. So what I always suggest is, as a company, just like when it comes to your understanding your cybersecurity insurance liability, or even like what's the risk in the organization from a business perspective, it's really I think it's got to be at the board level, the exec level, to understand what that is, because no one's going to listen to anyone else except for, and the fiduciary duties there, right? And this is the thing that people are starting to understand is when you go to an executive and you say, there's the fiduciary duty, and this is something that it's probably not new for us, but it is starting to get through to executives. They start to realize that this is not a nice to have, this is a need to have, right? And then you have to work into your business, and that's an eye opener, because then all of a sudden you open up budget, you take it serious versus not taking it serious, or only taking it serious after a data breach, which we know we've been part of that world for a while, right?
Yeah, the shift is happening, and I'll credit a lot to like regulation. I'm getting, and I don't know where your newest demand or if it's making a difference in your guys' world, but even obviously CMMC, that's the low hanging fruit. CMMC, that's getting a lot. Yeah. That's getting us pushed in a lot of directions. Getting even Senteon, right, our level 2 and everything all set up just so we can continue to service. But even with HIPAA releasing version 2, right, that's something that's getting people talking about healthcare again. And for ages, it's like, I can't get my doctors to do this. They don't care. And they still don't. But V2 is at least empowering the MSP to bring it back to light. So it is cool getting to see how the landscape's changing, I guess, for us.
The only way from a regulatory compliance perspective you can enforce it is what GDPR did, which is regulate the fines. It's the only way. When there's a bite, people actually listen, because otherwise it's like a slap on the hand, doesn't work. And we've seen that far too often. I think with CMMC, I think you're going to see it broaden out and be used across different industries because of the pragmatic way that they've actually done the CUI, the data detection, and the tiering of the data. Like, that's how you have to look at it. Like, and it's, so what we've talked about is like your assets, your data is not one equals the same, right? And so with CMMC, they've done a good job of that. And quite frankly, you know, we have customers where if they don't pass the audit, they don't get contracts. Yeah, that's real.
100%. So there's the it's not even a slap on the wrist anymore. There's a financial risk with clients, and I'll take it even next level to the vendor point of view. Like I said, we've outlined what we need to do, but it's also impacting our roadmap. So some of the pieces we wanted to do with the Senteon learning mode might have blurred some lines on, you know what, if we look at this event log or this historical view, we're going to have CUI that we're storing. And we have to adjust our technical roadmap to make sure we can still get the functionality we want without crossing a line, because FedRAMP moderate ain't cheap or easy for us vendors to get. So we have to be extremely cautious with the technical side because of it. And that's how a regulatory framework should work. It's not just impacting the MSPs, the end clients that are applicable. It affects its supply chain.
100%. We're part of that. We're part of that process entirely, and we should be. Like, we actually have a customer right now that's going through an audit.
Yep.
They pull us in. We're part of it. We can't not be. We're part of their tech stack. So, and that's just the world we live in. And, you know, it's going to evolve and change, and we're just going to have to deal with it as it's a moving target.
Yeah, putting together our shared responsibility matrix has been fun. There's so much to that world, but vendors are keeping up or catching up, and MSPs are going to be forced to as well.
Yeah. Again, great stuff, guys. Appreciate the dialogue, and segue into something else here real quick. And that is, and if you're in the audience, you may start sensing a little bit of an underlying theme here that we're going to hit on for a couple of slides. But how can MSPs bridge the gap between just talking about vulnerability scans versus talking about real world risk, say that 3 times fast, to their clients? So Zach, I'm going to hand this one to you to start with, if you want to.
I would say the first thing that really comes to mind with this one is we hinted at this earlier, but we need to remove the silos. Really, a good vulnerability management program needs to be a cohesive process. One owner shouldn't go through the entire program on their own, but it does need to flow. And maybe there is one piece that flows across all the phases, but it really, aligning the tools to the ownership of the tools, to the remediation, to presenting to the client, showing the QBRs. Like, a true program is not just a tool. A program is a series of things that create an output. And the best way, let's see, rephrase, bridge the gap. So like real world risk is going through the entire process to minimize it, but also relating, hey, why was this process in place? Why was this part of the prioritization in our vulnerability management program? Why didn't we do this, right? You explain the output of why this was prioritized to the end client, if it's applicable, right? These shouldn't do this every single CVE or every single remediation, right? There's thousands of these remediations you can do, and you can't explain every single thing. But relating the general output as to the why should be part of that process if the client's involved.
James, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's at a high level, it's understanding the cause and effect. So vulnerability management is a piece of the puzzle, right? It's like saying you're in a board meeting and your revenue is $20 million, and that's great. But there's all these top of funnel metrics that equal going through the sales cycle that you really don't care about until you start to understand, drill in what the problem is. And I think sometimes we as technology folks, we tend to go right to the tech stack and talk about, the tech stack versus the output, what Zach said. And we got to start thinking like a business, like from a business KPI standpoint. So what is it? What's the cause and effect? So if there is a breach, at the end of the day, what does that mean for the company? And it starts off with those conversations. So is it a business impact? So if the business is offline for 2 days, does that matter? If there's a ransomware attack and you got to restore the data, it takes 3 days, does it really matter? If it doesn't, then you can understand what your risk is and your business impact. But if it does, and this is catastrophic to your business, then something needs to happen, right? And so it's I'm going to take what you said, Zach. It's that changing that culture of understanding the pieces versus the whole picture of the cause and effect and what it actually can mean to the business when bad things happen, which we know it happens all the time. It's only a matter of when, not if.
And you're saying you can't build resilience or a program mid-breach? I mean, can't we just wait?
That'll be the next one. We'll work on that later. AI it.
Exactly. Like it's I mean, we mentioned this earlier, but the secure by design, but it's having the program set up, understanding the onboarding, and I keep going back to this because it's I think heavily weighted in my world, but the enforcement of knowing when a patch was in place and then it wasn't, knowing when things are getting done. Hey, we followed the process to a T, and then the next day it looks like something broke, right? Who's the owner of that remediation? How are they going to catch it before next time? So, but yeah, it's not building a program or trying to build resilience mid incident.
Yeah.
No, good point. Good point. So, look, the three of us, we talk to literally thousands of MSPs collectively every year. And you get involved with conversations with the MSPs and sometimes even their clients. So, what do successful vulnerability management programs do differently? James, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah. So I think the challenge that MSPs have, well, probably more of the end customers, is they it's the magic wand. They think it's all going to be taken care of. And the reality is there are different layers, right? And so setting proper expectations up front is absolutely critical. We have a lot of MSPs that have different tiers, but if an end customer opts into a certain tier that doesn't have certain parts of the security program or practice, what does that mean for them? And then really making sure that they understand that business impact that we talked about, because what I find is it's always a shock, or that person who made the decision is no longer at the company, and it's this big surprise. So it's that ongoing making sure that it's that feedback loop, understanding the organization change, making sure that the stakeholders understand and set the expectations on what it is that cybersecurity practice, that vulnerability management is actually giving you. Like, we've had some cases where we found out the end customer thought they were they were getting vulnerability management for Mac and Linux. So we offer that, but it just so happens it's not. And why? Someone made the decision not to do it. So when something happened and they went over to, they added more Mac users, then it's like, okay, well, this is a problem, right? So, these type of little trip ups happen a lot, and it's because there's so many moving targets. And so I really think you got to have, as like I said before, you have board meetings once a quarter. You have to make that part of the cybersecurity practice. You got to make sure the executives understand. Almost, I see a lot of folks that are getting it signed off. I know MSPs have been doing it for a while, but even at the end customer, it's like making sure that people sign off, just like we do at the board level. Like we have our meeting minutes that we need to sign off and submit, so that during due diligence of whatever type that it's there. And I think that we just got to incorporate that type of best practice.
So and I might get in trouble for one of the things I say, but the first thing I'll say in response, like, so you mentioned like trip ups and moving target, like 100%, it's hard to avoid, but I will go back. This can be minimized or mitigated by assigning a proper owner to certain areas, right? If it's not about having one owner for all of Cavelo, right? It's much broader. Like, for Senteon, we're literally just doing the baselines and hardening the registry. Like one owner for that might make sense, but for a full vulnerability management program like Cavelo facilitates and views, one owner probably isn't enough. And I could be wrong, right? But you guys know your platform better than I do. But especially for the program as a whole, not just talking about a tool, it does need to have multiple owners, because without it, as you said, the trip ups and whatnot are absolutely going to happen. And going to the question where I don't know if my team would get mad at me for saying, but I would say the successful vulnerability management programs actually may not involve the customer that much. The MSP, the successful ones, really have it built internally, where they are going through a process with accountability steps in place. Then you talked about it earlier with gamifying, right? That could be an aspect of a successful one, but the point of gamifying is whoever's owning the vulnerability, whoever's owning that program, is checking to see results and constantly seeing things get better. Because without accountability and checking on it, who's going to win the game, right? So I would say the most, you can respond. I can go off my rant in a little bit. What you got?
No, I absolutely agree. I think that I just want to comment. So you brought up one thing that I'm definitely seeing now, and this is interesting, and I think this is good practice. MSPs are now saying, take it or leave it.
Yep.
It's like, you got to go with the full stack. And if you don't decide to, you're not a customer for us. And I love that.
They could change the whole sales cycle. Like, hey, you want us to be your security provider? Great. Here's an overview of our vulnerability management program, or just our security program, obviously using the name of the webinar, but you're now presenting a program to the to the end client, to the prospect, instead of, hey, here's feature 1, baseline hardening, feature 2, cloud hardening, feature 3. It's, here's our program. You're never going to hear about it because our whole program and all the accountability, all the ownership, it's all with us. You will never have to worry about this program because this is what you're paying for. We'll present to you these outputs.
Yeah, agreed.
So, but yeah, that's my little bit of a hotter take is vulnerability management needs to be in-house with a ton of ownership, a ton of accountability, and tracked for improvement, where, yeah, you can involve the client and they should have their QBRs. You need to keep them engaged so they do acknowledge that you're improving, but the bulk of the program is in-house.
No, good stuff, gents. Good stuff. Hopefully you can still hear me. While y'all were talking, my screens went black. I lost my speaker. I lost my mic. So can you hear me first and foremost?
Yeah, we're good.
Good deal. Just wanted to make sure. No, I wanted
Zach,
to go back.
we can't see you. The screens went black.
Yeah, it's good for everybody if the screen goes black when I'm on the screen. But no, what I was going to say is, it sounds to me like there's a lot of education that the MSP should be doing for their end clients around this whole topic that we've been talking about today. And, I'm a little bit biased because obviously I work for Cavelo and I'm friends with Zach and James. But, listening to what you guys are saying, if I'm an MSP, I would take a recording of what we're talking about here and I'd make it mandatory for my clients to take a listen to this, because that's going to help them educate that client on putting those processes together and how important some of this stuff is. So anyway, all right.
Let's dive into that really quick before transitioning. And Larry, remind me again. I know you've been in so many shops and seen so many avenues. Were you an MSP to start, or were you at an MSP? Remind me.
No, I have always been on the vendor side of things. So,
but I would be curious to ask some of our partners, or just a little research, right? Like, what would be the most valuable 3-minute clip of how to prepare a client when they've never had an MSP before, right? Like, in that video, would you define what their, I mentioned earlier with CMMC, the shared responsibility matrix? Should an MSP have an SRM with their end client? Like, what are they responsible for within that vulnerability management program? My opinion is very little, right? Minimum, but they are still responsible for following the processes. They're responsible for not tearing out the guardrails, right? But yeah, I'd be curious, what 3-minute clip could an MSP start sharing ahead of the relationship getting mid-incident, as we said a little bit ago?
No, great stuff. James, anything to add to that? I've got an idea, but go right ahead if you've got something.
You start, Larry. I'll add to what you have to say.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, Zach, maybe you hit on our topic for next quarter's conversation that we have together, and maybe we could put some stuff together that would be meaningful for the MSPs to put in front of their client base. So that's all I have.
I like that a lot. I think that's a great idea, and especially both of our platforms. Like, even today, we haven't done much like company plugs, feature talk like this. A lot of our style and why we get along so much at the shows and talking on these is it really is just bullshitting about security, to be transparent. Like, this is all just real talk, and it doesn't have to be about the tech. And that's one piece that a lot of MSPs might struggle with, talking about features, tools. I struggle with, because I love talking the tech, but even doing this with you guys helps me as well.
Yep. Good stuff. All right. Speaking of talking tech and all that fun stuff,
as the transition slide.
Exactly. We got to talk about our platforms here just a little bit. So, to both of you, how does Cavelo and Senteon help MSPs shift vulnerability management from just checking the box and moving on to making it real risk reduction for their clients? And I'll just throw it out there. Who wants to start?
I'll start, and I'm going to pass it to you, Zach. I'll do a soft up for. It's really what we've been talking about is the remediation. So we at Cavelo, we have a platform. We do data discovery and classification. So we tell you where your data is, and both in the cloud and on-prem, we tell you where all your assets are, and then we will overlay vulnerability management to give you that multi-dimensional view into your threat landscape. We also do what we call configuration management, which is CIS benchmark in the cloud, and we do remediation. And where Senteon comes in, and I'll just say this: I've never found a company that has done such a great job of the remediation, and have done it in such a way that it's not scary. Like, I think that we brought up the whole registry change and all that stuff. Truly, everyone's scared. Right. And so if you understand the tech stack more of Senteon, you'll understand that there's rollbacks, and they've done it in such a unique way that's tailored towards the MSP and doing the right thing, and being able to, if there's something that needs to happen after, you can roll back and all that good stuff. And I'll let Zach talk about it. And so I actually think that it's great that we're two entities, because we're two trusted entities together. But as a vendor, as a tech stack, we can't be great at everything, and this is not possible, right? But our claim to fame is what we do well, which is what I talked about. And with Zach's company, it's like I understood that right at the beginning, there's no way we could do what they've done, and just understanding that, making sure that we have that relationship and that partnership through APIs makes us stronger as a whole.
And that's the exact same back, because we don't want to enter the space of that 365 remediation. It may be forced one day, but if we can just do it through integrations and, our partners that we have, obviously you guys being our partner, like, that's going to be the best route for us, because MSPs will always say this, and I've pushed back because I've become slightly jaded on some of the topics, and this is one of them. An MSP will always prefer to have a best of breed tool as opposed to an all-in-one. That's interesting because a lot of times when they do choose a best of breed tool, they ask for it to do more and more. So very interesting how scope creep might happen. But that's exactly our mindset, where we understand Cavelo has the overall broader vulnerability management program, and Senteon focusing on existing configurations. You mentioned CIS benchmarks. Those are, of course, existing in the cloud, but Senteon's taken it a little bit even further to the existing settings as we get into the application hardening layer, the existing settings in your Adobe, the existing settings in your Chrome, in your Edge, right? These are, they don't really have a good term. They do lump into vulnerabilities sometimes. I've heard the term exposures passed around, but these are the innate settings available on applications, on your OS, on your browser, that are available to be changed without having a CVE associated, if you will. So it's really exciting when we get to have partners like Cavelo where they understand that and they're starting to incorporate exposures into their vulnerability management program, because now it's not just Zach yelling at the top of a mountain. We need to do exposures as well. I now have Cavelo with me. I now have so-and-so with me to bring more light towards CIS and CIS benchmarks. And James, you obviously made the formal loud announcement at PAX 8 about getting into the remediation space. I know it's something you guys done for a while, but I think it was a release to the broader world. Do you mind just giving us the high level, like what is a CIS benchmark for the audience who may not be familiar?
Yeah, so what we do from a CIS benchmark, and CIS benchmark is one feed, but we've chosen that one. We actually overlay the regulatory compliance, so CMMC, and what's the best practice, which that context is important. So it's not like we want to make it so easy for our customers that they don't have to pick and choose. However, we also know they need to pick and choose, because at the end of the day, even with you pick CMMC, NIST, whatever it might be, there's certain controls that just don't make sense for the customer. So we allow for that. In a perfect world, what you want to have some form of a template, and then you apply it, but it's never going to be one, right? It just doesn't happen that way. And so what we've done is we said, okay, we're going to allow for out of the box. We're going to have these templates that are predefined, but allowing our customers to go in and modify it accordingly. They save it. They can have it for a subset of customers, many different tenants, whatever it might be, because we're multi-tenant.
Yep.
And then on top of that, what we've done is we said, out of the 80 or so controls, we started with what are the ones that we can actually go in and remediate. And so there's going to be some that are process stuff that we just can't do for obvious reasons, but we'll give you the line item to go in and modify it accordingly, so you can use that as your kind of audit piece. At the end of the day, we don't care if that gets fed into another dashboard, because we find that there's a lot of different single pane of glasses out there, whether or not it's for QBRs, a virtual CISO, or from a regulatory compliance perspective. But our job is to automate, make the MSP's life easier so that they don't have to copy paste or have spreadsheets. That's all we're going to do. We're going to continually go down that avenue, and we're going to add more to our roster of remediation items, and we'll just add more functionality from that perspective.
And those recommendations, those CIS ones, those are we do the same thing, right? We're doing at the endpoint level, the application level, but those CIS recommendations are tried and proved, right? That's a nonprofit, 20,000 plus people worldwide.
And then you roll it back if for whatever reason you got to have stateful, all that good stuff. And that's where it's if you're doing it manually, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And you mentioned this earlier, doing it manual, like you forget who made the change. I haven't seen the new feature release, but I know for us, like actually documenting who made the change or where we're going with the context, what made the change, right? And who was the signed in user at the time. Like those are critical pieces of data that, for us, and again, I haven't seen the new release, but like that can feed into a SIM or a SOAR or some type of log aggregator, because those are pieces of the puzzle that forensics and IR have maybe never had before. When a config changes, when a reg key changes for us, when a cloud policy changes for you, like that's context that was never had before.
It's part of SOC 2. It's best
Oh yeah,
practice.
change history is right there with cyber insurance and SOC 2. It's been required.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing is we see a lot of churn, like employee retention, where it's the talent. There's a talent pool issue, and customers end up going from either one MSP to another, or even the end customer. And so when someone leaves, they can't. That knowledge transfer just doesn't happen. So if it's part of the platform and that audit trail, it's critical to understand all the changes.
Do you ever ask when was the last time your golden image was updated? Do you ever ask that question, or is that more applicable to me?
No, we do. So what we find is it's almost like that world. It's like a perfect world that doesn't always exist, is probably what I'd say. Like, it's like everyone goes and says, okay, let's do one image. And then another tenant or one of their customers wants something different. And now you've got 2 images, then you got 3, and then you got 4, and you got 5. And then you get to a point where the whole thing is just gone. Like the whole master image.
And then there's updates, new settings, deprecated settings, and all of these pieces that don't exist. I mean, to hammer in CIS, and Larry, I know you want to transition us, but to hammer in one more time on the recommendations that we look at, and I'll talk browsers because that's the idea, the one I'm looking at right now. For Chrome, they released their recommendations just in July, so we're about a year out. But if you were to look 6 months after it was released, from July to February, about 23% of those recommendations on the browser no longer existed. So now we're not just asking when was the last time you looked at your golden image. We're asking when was the last time you updated it? When was the last time you removed things from it? When was the last time you added the new settings? If you haven't noticed, if you use the Chrome browser, there's 7 new AI specific settings that are just auto-enabled that nobody knows about, and I guarantee none of your clients use.
That topic is another hour conversation, Zach. Careful.
Wait till the OS starts integrating the AI settings, because it's coming. I think it's like probably damn near in production.
We could talk about that for a while. I know it.
Yeah. Hey, maybe there's Q4's topic, but we'll keep moving on. And just for the audience, real quick, we've just got 2 more questions coming up. We're going to try to get you out of here pretty quick, but going back to the underlying theme here, look, most MSPs by nature are technical. They were techies that said, I'm tired of working for somebody. I want to work for myself. And it's hard. It's really hard for MSPs to stop talking techie. So rather than an MSP talking like patch counts or scan frequency or all this stuff that the customer doesn't care about, how can they talk to the customer? How should an MSP be measuring success? What KPIs really resonate with the business executives out there? And again, I'm just going to toss it out there. Whoever wants to jump in first.
I mean, we both have opinions,
okay.
I'm sure. Kill it, brother.
Rock, paper, scissors.
I'll follow you.
There's no, what we found is truly I think the MSP world, their claim to fame is to really figure out how to sell this, right? In their own way, because there's different verticals. They understand their customers better than we do. But it's our job to give them the tools to be able to sell the product. And I think I'm going to say this in a very subtle way. MSPs for us, what they bring to the table is that expertise, that trust with their customers that we're never going to get if we hire salespeople, which we never want to do because it's a pain. And at the end of the day, from a go-to-market perspective, we as a vendor need to give our MSPs the right tools to be able to sell the product. I also think that going to events and being part of an ecosystem is absolutely critical. And so we see this when we go to events and MSPs. They actually it's wild. They love understanding what others are doing, including vendors.
Yep.
So tapping into that is critical. And I think, quite frankly, we as vendors need to do a better job as well. Understand that go-to-market piece.
I mean, I'd even say like the MSPs appreciate learning and getting involved with the vendor, but I wouldn't even call that unique to the MSP. I find it very impressive how MSPs will say, I'll take a client anywhere in the country, when I would be inclined to think the MSP end client wants to know a little bit about the MSP too. So when they're at the shows, when they're in their end client community, I feel like that's going to be the best way they can create their relationship, just like us to the MSPs. And talking KPIs, man, this one's hard for me because it's ROI is a lot of the time, that's the topic you need to relate things to. And how do you make ROI? Well, you have to use numbers. So, you don't really want to say how many scans did we run? That's not exciting. It's what changed because of us, right? But how can you show what changed because of us without using, hey, there were 800 new CVEs. We changed 250 of them, which might be an incredible ratio. But the only thing they're going to ask is what happened to the other handful that you didn't do, right? So using those quantity numbers can be a little bit tough to walk. But if I were to say like measuring that, it's what changed because of us, and relating it back to how they're running their business. Hey, we've had these processes in place. We noticed these things change. So letting them know, hey, we caught your business or whatever was happening. Something changed on our end, or we detected drift. We detected change because of something. And we've now identified that, adjusted the process. And this is how we're keeping it from happening again. But creating that story, making them feel involved with the program while them not having necessarily a direct critical involvement.
Yep, I agree. Boy, Zach, do we like to hear our own voice?
Man, we sound good. It's that Italian blood. You got more than me, but you know what?
I didn't even say I'm Italian yet. That's my underline.
I was going to suggest maybe next time we do this over wine and bourbon or whatever.
I was going to say, I keep on seeing you take a drink, but it's,
keep going.
I don't know what you got. Apple juice in that glass? Where you at, James?
That's Gatorade. I have a nice bottle of Italian wine I could be bringing out right now.
We can do a little late night one. We get a little recurring theme.
I like it. We'll get some cheese and make it, done.
We'll make this like a fireside chat in the middle of summer or something like that.
Love it.
But let's go ahead and close things up here. I'm going to get some final thoughts. And, one of the questions I was going to ask, but I know we're kind of running out of time here. And that is, AI. Hey, it's been around forever, but many people don't realize that. So I think it was created in the past year or two. But, how do you guys think AI is going to change the game in vulnerability management, if at all? And then give us your closing thoughts.
I'm going to kick off this one because this one I think definitely is going to relate more to James than myself. So talking company perspective, Senteon is all about remediation. My viewpoint and what I'm already seeing is a lot of the detect tools are working to adopt this so they can discover better, prioritize better, create summaries better and faster, right? So I do believe there's a massive shift in vendors and technology taking advantage of AI to present better. But in the relationship of what is a vulnerability management program? A program has to include remediation and drift enforcement. And from what I've seen, the tech we're building, AI is not able to do that remediation, enforce that remediation. Maybe they can create point-in-time scripts, but AI as part of the, in my opinion, most critical part of a vulnerability management program, remediation and enforcement, right? AI, I don't believe is going to help with that anytime soon. But it's very interesting to see where James takes this because I don't know your roadmap or anything, but I do believe vulnerability management detect platforms and that the first half of a program will adopt it a lot heavier.
Yeah, I mean, so it comes back to cutting through the noise. We have a lot of telemetry information in our product, and so and it's AI machine learning. It's been around forever, like you said. But at the end of the day, looking for those patterns is absolutely critical, so that humans don't have to go through it, which they're not going to do fast enough, and they're going to make mistakes. Absolutely. That's where we have it today with data discovery and all that good stuff. However, I'm going to switch it around. The attack vector. This is where things get interesting. So what people haven't realized yet is social engineering is going to become extremely smart. It already has, and it's happening more and more. Meaning, it's absolutely scary. If my voice is out there on the internet, which it is right now, and many other videos, they can use my voice and basically take it and use it as authentication on banks. Now there's multi-factor, all that stuff. But my point is, if you think about it from a social engineering standpoint, it becomes that much more intelligent because there's more data pieces that can actually trick the human. And let's be honest, we're easy to trick. On the other side, the attack vector becomes very smart. When it comes to ransomware, I don't think people realize, but the software itself is not that intelligent. What happens is you end up buying the actual payload off the dark web, and they might modify it. You can actually lease it off the dark web to a certain extent. My point is they're just reusing old code. Imagine AI where it's actually learning the different patterns, both from a mechanical machine standpoint, but also a human standpoint. And I could talk about this, a lot, but I think that we need to be aware of the fact that, the attack vector is changing, is becoming more intelligent. The last piece I'm going to say to this is we talked about vulnerabilities being a word that's misused in the industry. AI is a vulnerability. Enabling Copilot is a vulnerability. I know someone who recently was chatting with someone in Teams, and what happened was the AI component, I forget the Google one, ended up summarizing the entire conversation. And at the end of the day, that information is information that they did not want to get out there. And if there's a vulnerability or the permissions aren't set right, that could go out to not only the rest of the employees, but also the rest of the world. And so, that readiness and understanding that the vulnerabilities that introducing AI into an organization is something that's absolutely critical. And we all know we love technology and we turn it on and then we're like, holy crap, this is one of them. So as an organization, as an MSP, you got to be very pragmatic. We do a Copilot AI readiness report to help our customers really understand the risk components.
And we use we're a Zoom house primarily, and I do have the Zoom Notes auto enabled, and there is no like prompt for consent. Like it is just enabled by default to have this, and obviously it's part of our best practices and we're aware of it, and it's set up appropriately. But like that's things you may not realize that are just there. And I love that you did take it the other way, because I was definitely talking more in-house on the program itself, but from the threat landscape side. We mentioned earlier, or rather I did, with awareness training. I think there's a lot of awareness training in the MSP world. Everyone wants to talk about the threats, why they're threats, how they're threats, but the remediation side is missed. And that is kind of okay the last decade or so, but now doesn't matter how much awareness you do. I'm making an accepted risk by putting my voice on the internet. If my sales team gets a phone call from not me with my voice, it's going to be pretty fucking hard to tell it's not me. So the threat landscape is just different. The awareness isn't enough.
I think, Zach, we could do something funny with your voice. The next one, we'll just do like a solo ad or something.
Put an avatar on me.
That's like another future webinar topic for us.
We could do a virtual campfire next to our virtual RVs, and it's just our voices, and we don't even have to be there.
I feel like we enjoy this more than anyone else.
Absolutely. And those in the audience, you can tell it's kind of hard to moderate these two because they just keep going and going and going and going. But, hey, we got those things up here real quick. So let's open it up for any final comments, final thoughts either one of you have. And James, I'll start with you, and then we'll move on to Zach, and then we'll sign off.
Yeah, no, for me, I think as a vendor, I think we have to work with other vendors and part of the ecosystem more.
Yep.
We need to be there for our partners and make sure that, we now have a community. I mean, a community was critical for us, and, it's just started, but we've got a lot of subscriptions. And so, our job is not to throw a product over the fence and walk away. Our job is to work with our partners to understand what it is that their challenges are. And, 30% of our roadmap is customer feedback, and because we're not in the trenches. And so I encourage these types of conversations to happen outside of the vendor conversations, but we need to talk more because we need to literally lower the risk of cyber breaches. There's wars that are happening today that are on the internet. There's your cyber crime where the people are sitting, they're not out on the streets, they're sitting behind a desk and doing malicious activity. We all have to work together in order to try to lower the risk of data breaches and cybercrime, et cetera, et cetera.
And that shift in the vendor landscape, I will say, is changing. And especially, I mean, Cavelo, you're a prime person to reinforce this. The vendor technology has to improve and start to assume that their partners, their clients, don't have the technical capabilities to perform remediation. Right? We're having to improve our technology, especially leveraging new technology. Right? We couldn't build Senteon 20 years ago. Right? But we have to, as vendors, continue to improve and understand the shortcomings or the labor shortage or the technical shortage, whatever you want to call it, that the things we want you to do as our partners isn't feasible unless we step up our technology, whether it's internal in-house dev or through partnerships like Senteon and Cavelo, right? Those are the pieces that is happening massively on the vendor side. But I guess to close thoughts on obviously the topic today with the MSP Vulnerability Management Program, security really starts right after the scan, right? You can't just have a scan and say, yep, this is my vulnerability management program, and then present it, right? No, that scan is the beginning of a human step until automation is that good. But that scan is the beginning of your program. And if there's no ownership, and this is something I'm saying more and more in every phone call I take, if there's no ownership of the asset, there's no responsibility to the vulnerability. God, that's a horrible line. But if there's no ownership there, then it's never going to get done. And being able to document it is definitely next level and harder. And I do believe vendors as well need to assist with that documentation, especially when our platforms start to do the remediation for you. Who was signed in? Who clicked that button? What time did they click that button? Right. So, and at the end of the day, it's okay to have more platforms in your stack. I'll emphasize that. Defense in depth doesn't happen with one vendor. So that's why we can partner and do webinars together, because we're not competitors. We are fighting the same mission. Sure, we're fighting for similar budget, but at the end of the day, both of us are doing something completely different that helps the overall picture.
No, absolutely. James?
No, I mean, Zach, you and I are preaching the same. I think you said it perfectly. I think, the end of it, I think with us, we're showing that we can work together to make it so that the product is better for our MSPs or better for our customers. I think it's great.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep, absolutely. So, Zach, James, my friends, thank you so much. I know I've learned a lot through this call, and hopefully our audience has as well. And Zach, I've come up with another one for you. How about Chief Remediation Officer?
Oh, there you go.
Chief RV Officer. Hey, man, we keep talking. I can get creative here. You never know.
I think Larry's going to be getting his own new title. He'll come up with something with an R himself. He's like,
Exactly. So
can I have Chief Wine Officer, and I'll make sure I bring some wine next?
CWO, there we go, and CI, Chief Italian, CIIC, Chief Italian in charge. Forget the CMMC stuff. We'll just do the CII. All right, guys. Been fun. It's a good thing we're not drinking, because no telling how long this would go. But this has been great. I hope our audience has enjoyed it as well. And stay tuned. We're going to do another one of these come up in Q3 and another one in Q4. And who knows what the topic's going to be. I think we discovered a few new topics here as we spoke today. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. I know you're busy. I know our audience is busy. We'll see you next quarter. On behalf of Cavelo and Senteon, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,